Hello and welcome to this AimHi Live. Thank you all for coming. This one is going to be about science, and this one's environmental science, and it's called Can Recycling Save Us? Now, if you're watching for the first time, then you can ask questions whenever you want. Just throw them into the chat, and that will steer the way that we go. I'll also be asking you guys questions, so yeah, also reply whenever you want. And yeah, if you're watching on the website, then you will get the best experience, and you'll be able to see everything or what everyone is saying and stuff, whereas if you watch on something like Facebook, then you can still watch it, but you'll miss like loads of the stuff that's going on. Anyway, so I'll say hi to people who are here. Phoebe's here, Rebecca's here, Get Out of the Freezer is here, Maddie is here, the other Maddie is here, Izzy is here, Zaynon's here. Okay, loads of people are here. Thanks all for coming. Right, before we get going, what I want you to do is could everyone just take their arm and like stretch it out and just pull down their elbow skin and then count how long it takes for it to spring back. See, my elbow skin took a good like 2 to 3 seconds to spring back, which is pretty slow. But I'm wondering how quickly your elbow skin sprang back to its original position. Okay, so Phoebe's saying like 1 second. Wait, I'm just gonna flip over to the old elbow picture. This is what I'd like you to do. Pull your elbows, and how long does it take to spring back? How long to spring back? Oops, missed that in. Yeah, how long does it take to spring back? Okay, we've got quite a few answers coming in from people here. So Rebecca's saying like 1 second. Phoebe's got like 1 second. Yeah, Posy Joe, I want to know how long it takes for you to pull your elbow skin down and wait to see if it springs back. Posy Joe's got like 0.3 seconds of springage, and Maddie and H Fisher have both got about more like 2 seconds. Right, okay, so the reason why I'm asking you guys this is because it's not quite perfectly related to Can Recycling Save Us, but your elbow skin as you get older, because you're obviously using your arm for stuff, like you're constantly doing this process, and as a consequence you're constantly stretching this bit of skin, and the older you get, the more it stretches on and on and on until it does what's called plastic deformation. So when you're really young, it's really elastic and you can pull it and it'll just bing, like spring back, just like the rest of your skin will spring back. But as soon as you start to age, your elbow skin just gets more and more saggy, and it does that faster than like pretty much any other part of your body. And yeah, if you meet a grandparent or a parent and you pull their elbow skin, then you'll find that it just stays there forever. And maybe it'll just carry on sagging, and maybe you'll even be fearful at the extent to which it sags. Anyway, why am I talking about this? I'm talking about it because this is kind of vaguely to do with plastic. So right, who here recycles? And if so, what kind of things do you recycle? Do you recycle? Like in your home, would you say you're like good at recycling or not so good? I'm interested to know like what kind of things people on this chat recycle in their homes. Oh, it's Pride Month. Happy Pride Month, all. Posy Joe's knuckle takes longer. Oh, right. And Leonard's saying that the spring back is really quick. Yeah, so the younger you are, the faster it's going to spring back. Okay, so Xenon's recycling water bottles, Miz is recycling cardboard, Venable Sugar recycles plastic bags. Interesting you say plastic bags, because most plastic bags, as far as I know, can't currently be recycled. And a lot of people think that plastic bags can be recycled and put them in with plastic recycling, but normally they just get sent to landfill or burnt if they arrive at the recycling place. And Xenon's saying we try to avoid plastic bags, which is good. Reducing and reusing. Maddie's asking if time is the same for all of us. Isn't that a future episode? I think that's what's coming up tomorrow. And Miz is saying it's genuinely confusing what can and cannot be recycled. And that's totally true. And that is one of the really big problems, is that there was a time when there was a plan to have loads and loads of different recycling bins outside of everyone's houses, with loads and loads of subdivision, where they'd be like, right, this one's for green glass bottles, and this one's for clear plastic that belongs to this family of plastic, and so on. And they decided to get rid of this because they thought that people in the UK would not be smart enough or not be conscientious enough to do this. Whereas it is the case in Germany, where recycling is a lot better, where people subdivide their rubbish way, way more. Because do you guys know what one of the biggest problems is with recycling? And that you'll spend all this time sorting out your recycling into your recycling bins, it goes off to the recycling centre, and then what do you reckon happens to most of it? What happens to well, maybe not most of it, but what happens to a huge proportion of the recycling that goes to recycling centres? So Amy's talking about it's dirty. Yeah, so if you have dirty recycling, then that is often rejected by the recycling centres. Loads of people don't know this, that you have to clean your recycling before you send it off. If it's covered in food and oil and stuff, it just gets rejected. Posy Joe's saying recycling gets exported to poorer countries as well, and that is the thing that happens, is that recycling is sold to other countries where the British government will be able to say, oh, we recycled it because we sold it to so-and-so and they said they were going to recycle it, and then often it's actually not recycled anyway. Maddie's saying it's so hot outside, oh my god. Is it really hot? It is getting pretty hot, actually. And Rebecca Carmen's saying, yeah, they have different recycling bins outside in lots of different countries. But yeah, the problem is when the recycling goes to a recycling centre, lots of it does just get thrown away, gets burnt or thrown into landfill because it hasn't been sorted properly, or they don't have time to sort it properly, or like loads and loads of pressures. And if you actually go and visit these recycling centres, if you go and see them, and you meet the people there, then you find out very rapidly that people are not, that a lot of recycling just gets rejected, and it's actually really, really harrowing to see how much of it is not working out. Anyway, before we go on with that direction, did you guys who has saw the SpaceX launch connecting with the International Space Station? I love how there were several moments when the cameras cut out at like crucial times. There are going to be loads of conspiracy theorists who are going to be, and flat earthers, talking about how it's all because it was a big setup, and actually the world is flat / no one's ever gone to space before, which just because the cameras cut out. But anyway, I thought it was really cool to see it kind of put together in a way that was like so easy to follow what was happening at each of the stages. And I just think it's bloody amazing that we're actually bringing bits of the rocket back instead of them just ending up as debris, so that we can recycle them. It's a way better way to be going in the future. And Posy Joe's saying it was too cloudy, and oh yeah, it was so cloudy here. You couldn't see it from the UK. It was too bright, I think, in the sky still when it launched, but you could. But I was watching a stream of it, which was pretty cool. Japan Mabel saying, am I saying it was real? I'm not too sure. Well, I think it was real. It seemed pretty real to me. But that was because I was aboard for the whole of the filming of it in the Hollywood studio. Anyway, so yes, this is the International Space Station. Now, I'm about to talk about recycling in a way that might not come across as that positive. But before I do, I wanted to talk about the ISS, because on the International Space Station, what kind of things are recycled? What do you reckon? Rebecca's saying the coolest bit was when they brought the other bit down to the Earth. Yeah, 100%. It was so cool when they brought the other stages of the rocket back to the Earth, and when they land vertically. I think that's brilliant. Okay, so things that they recycle on the ISS. Answers coming in. So Sicto's saying everything, and that's exactly right. Yeah, they recycle everything. Gases are recycled round and round, and one of the ones that people always talk about is urine. So urine is all stored up in like a big urine tank, and it's processed into drinking water. And there'll be like a whole section of the space station that's entirely dedicated to processing drinking water and returning it back from the urine, because basically 100% of urine has to be has to be recycled back into water to drink. And yeah, loads and loads of things are recycled around the ISS. There is one city on Earth where, I can't remember the exact number, but a significant proportion of the drinking water is directly recycled from urine. One city in particular on Earth where huge amounts of the water comes from recycled from directly from urine. What do you guys reckon? Which city down below? Phoebe's saying sounds delicious. This thing is fine. You don't notice. I've been there and it just tasted fine. This could be recycled urine. Could just be urine. It isn't. That'd be gross. Okay, so someone's saying Dubai, Yemen, Melbourne, or Malta. So the place that I'm thinking of is Singapore. Singapore, a huge amount of the water is recycled urine because Singapore, because there's very little availability of springs and fresh water and so on, and so it's much easier rather than constantly importing it or constantly processing it from the sea to recycle some of the urine. So Singapore has loads and loads of recycled urine. Anyway, right. So someone saying, Leonardo's saying, I've been to Singapore. I have been to Singapore. It's because my twin lives in Sydney, and so when you go to Sydney, you normally go via Singapore. And normally I don't stay there, but there was one time that I decided to stay and explore, see what it was like. It's a pretty interesting, strange place. Anyway, right, we're not going to talk about Singapore. We're going to talk about somewhere just slightly to the south of Singapore, and this is called the Chitaram River. Who knows what country this is in? Oh, Leonardo's saying I'm to the ISS. No, I haven't been to the International Space Station. That would be so cool. Okay, so Jasmine's guessing India. Leonardo's saying no idea. Zenon's asking if I have an identical twin. And Rebecca's asking if it's evil. And Maddie's just distracted me with asking if time is the same for all of us. Maddie, I'm going to answer that tomorrow. That's what the lesson tomorrow is going to be on. But yes, I do have a twin, and she's not identical. She's a girl, and she does live in Sydney. And she's called Heather. And Maddie and Phoebe are identical twins, yeah. It's in Indonesia, yeah, exactly. Brilliant. So I think Phoebe came in with that. So this river is called the Citarum, and it's in Indonesia, in the middle of the island of Java. And this river does not look like this anymore. This river is now very, very clean. It's not completely clean. It's still not ideal, and by standards of like the UK, we might still think that it's not that great, but it's nowhere near what it used to be. It used to be this wasteland of plastic, and the reason why is because, well, it was a combined effort really, but a friend of mine called Gary, who lives in Bali, which is an island just next to Java where this river is, him and his brother Sam decided to build kayaks out of plastic, and they kayaked down the whole river through all the plastic and made a film about the whole thing, and they were constantly piecing it together as they were going. And by the time they finished it, they'd picked up so much media attention that the president of the whole of Indonesia wanted to meet them, and they basically got him to live on camera agree to sort out the river. And so just by these two guys just kayaking down a river, they completely transformed the river's fate, and there were then thousands of that. They deployed like entire units from the army to go and clean up the river, and thousands of troops were deployed to spend all day cleaning out all of the plastic. And ever since they've had much harsher rules and much more publicity around why plastic pollution is so bad. Now I know I haven't quite talked about Can Recycling Save Us yet, but two things. One, Gary might actually do a live lesson coming up soon, so you'll get to meet him if if we can find a time, but I think he's keen. And the other thing, why is plastic in the water so bad? Why is it so bad when the water is full of plastic? What do you guys reckon? What's the big problem with having plastic in the water? Maddie's asking if Gary, Gary's the person who may come on, although I may have said Sam, because Sam's his brother. Okay, so these are some great answers. Amy's saying microplastic, Xenon's saying fish eat them, Japan Maple's saying leaching of chemicals, Oliver's saying bioaccumulation, which is important as well. Sicto's saying blocks light. Xenon saying destroys the ecosystem. My God, these are some brilliant answers. Yeah, okay, so like blocking of the light is a problem, especially when it's this significant. That's going to destroy loads of the plant life. And the destruction of the plant life means that it's all going to rot, going to be eaten by loads of bacteria that are going to use up all the oxygen in the water and basically kill off everything else because there'll be no oxygen in the water. So covering up of light is one, although that's more of a minor one. And then there's the kind of very physical things you see where living things get stuck in plastic. You know, you see those pictures of birds and turtles and stuff wrapped in plastic that they can't escape. So that's like tangles and things like that. But the main one, which lots of you hit upon, and obviously, yeah, whales and things kind of eat it, because whales to eat, they just open their mouths really wide, the filter feeder ones, and just plow into loads of the ocean, and obviously they'll pick up loads of plastic over time. So yeah, tangles and consumption, but the main one, which loads of you said, so leaching is important as well, and like plastics will leach horrible chemicals, but actually the main thing is microplastics, where they break down into loads and loads of tiny pieces, and then those tiny pieces will accumulate loads of toxins, and that leads to what's called bioaccumulation. So the tiny pieces of plastic that float around in the ocean become magnets for all of the nasty chemicals in the ocean, which build up on their surfaces. Animals eat them, horrible toxins accumulate, so on and so on. Anyway, right, plastic is bad. I think we're all in agreement with that. And also, it seems like you guys are very knowledgeable about it, which I find really great to see. Like, well done for equipping yourselves with this much knowledge. That kind of thing is really important. Anyway, do you guys think that the UK... So sorry, I know that some of you aren't in the UK, but I'm just going to do it in the UK because that's where we are now. Do you think the UK is kind of is really good at sorting out the plastic problem, or do you think we're kind of really bad, or do you think we're kind of in the middle? Like, whereabouts do you think the UK sits in terms of getting people to sort out plastic? Amy wrote their marine bio assignment on microplastics. Yes, that is such a good topic to do. Okay, so people are saying pretty bad. The UK is pretty bad. Right. Okay, here's a quick plastic flamingo. I think I've said this before on another live, but just to remind people in case anyone missed it, there are now more plastic flamingos on Earth than there are real flamingos on Earth, which is insane. And kind of it's just a small... more plastic than real ones, which is just like a small little vignette to demonstrate the ridiculousness of plastic production on Earth. Thing is, when you make a plastic one, they don't really go away, whereas the real ones do eventually go away, and are replaced by others in a natural way instead of this very seemingly quite unnatural system that we've created. Anyway, so in the UK, we have a plastic bag charge. We try and convince people not to buy plastic bags at the supermarket by charging them a little bit extra for them. I remember when this came in, I was a bit optimistic about it. I was like, okay, great, this should hopefully help. The plastic bag usage has fallen a little bit, but it's not fallen anywhere near enough. Meanwhile, in Kenya, what do you reckon is the punishment for using a disposable plastic bag in Kenya? What's the official punishment for using a disposable plastic bag in Kenya? And while I'm just waiting for answers to come in, if you're joining late, this is pretty late, but if you are, then welcome to AimHi. This is a open online school where we're doing live lessons about all kinds of things. This one's about science, this one's about can recycling save us, and you can ask questions whenever you want. And if you're watching on Facebook, that's great, but you'll get way more out of it if you watch on here, aimhi.co, because that's where you'll see all the comments coming in instead of Facebook, which won't look like anything. Okay, so Posio's saying death, Sicto's saying a high fine. There's some things like, capital punishment, community service. Maddie has to go for lunch. Aim high is better than lunch. Yeah, thanks, Amy. So the last time I checked this, which was a few years ago actually now, but I think it's still the same, is that if you're seen with a plastic bag in Kenya, then you have to either pay a $37,000 fine, or you can get up to 4 years in prison, is what I saw last time I looked into this, which is crazy high. But actually, when you think about the environmental context of plastic, it kind of makes sense. Anyway, the core of this lesson was to kind of like talk about some of the problems with plastic. But in order to start actually answering this question of can recycling save us, I think that this is something that probably a lot of people on here already know, but one of the core ideas about plastic recycling is that recycling is completely inadequate. It's not good enough, and allowing people to think that recycling is a good thing is going to be even more a part of the problem in the long run. Because if you have a situation where people think, oh, it's fine to use plastic because if I just use a bit of plastic now, I can always recycle it and it doesn't matter too much, then people are going to continue to use it. Whereas if you show people how useless recycling is in the sense that a lot of the time it doesn't work, and even when it does work, how many times do you guys reckon you can recycle plastic before it gets too black and brittle for you to be able to sort it and reuse it? What do you guys reckon? Toby's talking about the ISS needing a top hat. I kind of feel like I need a different hat to use. I might give this one a baseball cap. There we go. Phoebe's got to go for lunch as well. All right, Phoebe, farewell. And okay, so we got a few 4s, 3s, 2s, 5s. This is a really good example, actually, of like anchoring effect, and that you've all kind of guessed quite close to one another. It's thought that you can recycle plastic about 8, 9, 10 times before it becomes too black and brittle to keep recycling it. But still, like as we talked about before, loads of recycling doesn't even happen. Doesn't even reach the point where it gets recycled, let alone actually manage to serve out its full life. And the problem is that we're essentially creating this product that does not disappear, and plastic just accumulates more and more and more. We're making many millions of tons of it every single year, and the numbers just keep accelerating upwards, which is crazy considering we know the damage that it's doing to the ocean. So can recycling save us in terms of plastic? No, absolutely not. Recycling will not save us with plastic. The only answer to plastic really is to massively, massively reduce the consumption of it and avoid it at all possible costs. That's always the game at the supermarket. The game is how much stuff can you get with no plastic? And you're like, okay, even like the garlic just comes in like this plastic bag thing that you obviously have to pick up like the single garlics, and anyway, it's insane, like trying to dodge through plastic at the supermarket. But you have to do it, because the more that supermarkets see that people are avoiding plastic, the more that they'll also take the lead on following it. But at the same time, I don't want to make people feel responsible for it being like, if we don't do it, then it's all our fault, because it's also the supermarket's fault in that they shouldn't be allowing the plastic packaged goods to be so cheap. And that's another thing that a lot of campaigners are working really hard to try and change. So Posy Joe's just asked a question about. So there is a bacteria that can eat one kind of plastic. I think it's PET, but it can do it on a very small scale, very slowly, and it's really not going to work for removing all the plastic in the world. It's one of those headlines that people get all excited about because they're like, oh, the plastic problem is solved. We can just do what we were doing before and carry on. We can't. We have to stop using plastic. Our solutions are still nowhere near good enough. The only viable solution that we have for the plastic problem is this. So this is called a plasma torch. And this is an extremely hot blowtorch that does a process called pyrolysis. So, I've lost my pen. Here we go. Yeah, pyrolysis. So these are these like old-fashioned words that often get bundled together. Does anyone know what pyro means and what lysis means? And don't worry if you don't, but these are kind of words that get repeated in like science and literature and all those kind of things. Okay, so yeah, pyro is to do with fire. Xenon Get Out of the Freezer is saying. So pyro is kind of fire or hot things. And Izzy Rose is brilliant saying splitting as well. So lysis is to do with splitting things. So using fire to split things. And so these torches run at many hundreds, if not, I think thousands of degrees Celsius. And if you expose plastic to these, then it will convert the plastic to gases that we can then use to make useful things like pharmaceuticals and so on, in a way that is clean and easy to recycle round and round. The problem is that these torches need such a huge amount of energy that we just can't afford to do it yet until we start to unleash in much larger amounts of power, maybe through something like fusion, when nuclear fusion finally comes online. But until that happens, we absolutely have to stop using plastic because it's destroying the oceans, which is the most important ecosystem on Earth for us, because the oceans are where almost all of the world's oxygen comes from. And so it's completely crazy that we would allow the oceans to be becoming so damaged in ways that are so visible with whales washing up on beaches and all these kinds of things. And huge like algal blooms occurring that shouldn't be occurring, and the oceans are struggling. And the idea that recycling can save us with plastic is ridiculous. I really want people to leave knowing that we must just not use plastic, and we must be really kind in the way that we kind of explain this to people and say, yeah, I know that plastic seems fine when you recycle it, but actually you just shouldn't use it at all. Anyway, now, before we finish, I just wanted to leave on a bit more of a positive point. Does anyone know what these are? This is a kind of metal that you can cut with a knife. So this is someone just like scraping it off. It's like even softer than a rubber. And look how shiny it is on the inside, even though it's kind of greyish on the outside. What metal do you guys think it is? And I'm just going to, while people are saying, I'm just going to catch up on a bit of chat. Okay, it's been quite a lot said. Okay, Amy Sum is talking about there being a cool trial to upscale a technique, flash burning rubbish into graphene. So that actually sounds quite similar to this pyrolysis, this plasma torch. And Darkstar Gaming is saying inventing fusion power to melt plastic. Yes, exactly. That is one of the big reasons for fusion power, is so that we can get a much better pyrolysis recycling running. Faye is saying... Faye's saying, I think we should look from the start. Why are these big corporate companies still producing these plastics? Well, because it's cheap. And yeah, the big companies continue to produce plastic on these huge scales because it's cheap and it allows them to make a huge profit. And I've forgotten her name now, but the head of sustainability or something silly at Pepsi at a big conference recently was talking about how they were going to carry on doing plastic because their consumers wanted plastic and therefore they should give it to them. And that should be okay. And it's just like these people on completely the wrong side of history. History is going to look back on those kinds of people and just think they were the most evil people that existed. I think we look back on regimes in the past and we think about atrocities that were committed against people. I think we'll look back in a few decades' time against atrocities committed against nature, and we'll look at the leaders who allowed them to happen, and we'll be looking back on them with the same degree of like contempt and thinking we can never let that happen again. That's the dream. Anyway, right, there have been some great guests coming in. So Japan Maple spot on with sodium. Yeah, this is sodium. Sodium is so soft that you can just cut it with a butter knife and it'll just like peel off, and it's really shiny on the inside. Anyway, I just wanted to show you that, and also this other metal, which is a really valuable metal called palladium. And palladium is used in all kinds of like catalysts and electronics, and yeah, it's becoming increasingly used. These kinds of materials, we need to recycle these. Like these ones we have to keep recycling because they can be recycled. And it's kind of one of the big problems with the world is that it's still cheaper to mine out something like palladium than it is to take all of the like catalysts and electronics and things being flown away that contain stuff like palladium and pull out the old palladium and recycle it. And one of the things we really need to turn around about the world is getting much better recycling of these precious metals, because that kind of recycling can save a huge amount, and is going to be needed the more that the world becomes a centre for the world becomes kind of based on electronics. And so I wanted to end on kind of a bit of a positive note about recycling not saving us, but being really important, especially when it comes to things like precious metals. And also, I don't want to discourage people from recycling in general. Like if you have rubbish like glass and tins and all of those kinds of things and plastic, then do recycle it at the very least. But just particularly with plastic, you have to try to avoid it. That is so important. Anyway, I think I'm wondering, is this? I feel like the people watching this are quite good at ensuring that you're good recyclers. That you're good at not using plastic. But I'm wondering how many people has this changed the minds of in terms of how much plastic you might use. Has this changed anyone's mind in terms of potentially using less? Anyway, right. Thanks all for coming. Do go to AimHi and join the mailing list so that we can let you know about upcoming lives, and do follow our social media and tell your friends. I'm gonna stay on the chat for a moment because I've seen there's so many comments come in and I've not been very good at responding to them in the last 5 minutes. So I'm gonna stay and take questions if anyone would like to continue to ask things. But in the meantime, do follow that. And thanks for coming. If this was your first time, then look forward to welcoming you back next time. I will be back tomorrow at 1 with Is Time the Same for all of us? Right, thanks all. Faye is saying people want plastic. Is it the marketing? Okay, so Faye, you and I are maybe thinking that we shouldn't use plastic because we know how damaging it is. But all over the world, people who don't know how damaging it is will choose that product because it's cheaper. So given the option between a can and a plastic bottle, they'll choose the plastic bottle, and it's very easy for Pepsi to stand up and say, well, that's them wanting the plastic. When really what Pepsi should say is the people who don't know about the damage of plastic want to buy the cheaper thing because they also don't have much money. That's what Pepsi should be saying. And then they should be saying, and we want to allow them to buy it because it will allow us to be more profitable. Because that's essentially what Pepsi are doing. But they obviously lie about it in a way that's convenient for them because they don't care about ruining the world for the long term of the planet. And Jasmine's saying, isn't palladium used in catalytic converters? Yeah, that's right, it is. Amy's saying helium makes me so mad seeing how cheap helium balloons are. Yeah, helium is something that we will eventually just be completely depleted of. Because, yeah, it's crazy how cheap it is for helium balloons. Faye is saying thoughts on bioplastics. Good question. So A lot of the, so if you're talking about bioplastics being made from biological sources, then often that's good. So like polylactic acid is made from lactic acid, which is normally extracted from corn or maize. And polylactic acid is quite good, but again, still, it is still a plastic that does still take a while to break down. The whole point of this is the thing that I think is quite important to get our head around, is that plastic, plastic is designed to be durable and unreactive. That's the whole point. The whole point is that it's an unreactive surface that we can store stuff in that won't degrade as you add stuff to it. But the whole like that means that plastic is going to be really damaging in the ecosystem because it won't break down, and most things in nature break down relatively quickly. And so even something like polylactic acid, which is a bioplastic, it is made from a biological substance, it still actually takes a surprisingly long time to break down in the ocean, during which time it can still kill countless marine organisms, bioaccumulate dangerous chemicals, which can then be absorbed and taken up into the food chain. So again, it's better than others. It biodegrades faster than others, but it's still not great. Get Out of the Freezer saying they're going to really reduce the plastic in their diet by at least 5%. That's good. And Japan Maple has been inspired to look more at plastic use. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, Izzy's saying, what do you think about using plastic to reduce food waste? Oh, I'm not sure what you mean about that. Using plastic to reduce... Oh, as in using plastic packaging to ensure that food doesn't go off. Okay, I understand the point there. Okay, I agree that plastic packaging is good at reducing food waste, but I actually think that this is a problem that's been displaced onto packaging when it shouldn't be displaced there. The reality is that supermarkets want to make as much money as possible, and so to do so, they try to sell food for as cheaply as possible. And part of that system means that they want food to last a long time so that they can stock it in ways that are profitable for them. But what they should actually be doing is thinking about how they can present more limited, present stock that is all fresh or more fresh on the days that it's sold, does not necessarily need plastic packaging to extend its food life, but basically rearranging the food system to work for food having a shorter food life, which may put food prices up slightly, but would mean that we wouldn't need things to last as long because we'd have food supply much better matched up with demand. And Sicto's saying, so cans are better than plastic for drinks. Yeah, certainly, because they degrade much more easily in the surroundings and are much easier to recycle. Rebecca Carmen's saying it's annoying that the kids want to change things and the adults are the ones with the power. Actually, there are loads of adults who want to change things as well. The problem is that the people with power are like completely entrenched in a system that's all about making profit. And when things are all about making profit, that actually leaves very little room for nature and the environment, because protecting nature, unfortunately, is not profitable. And so that's why there's this conversation going on all the time about how the system that we're living in is kind of broken, considering the challenges that we face, because people are always talking about like, how do we build businesses that will make the world better, and some people try to do that in ways that are positive, but ultimately, if we live in a world that's controlled by money and finance, and whilst people are trying to make profit, they won't be looking after the environment. And Sicto is saying there is also a problem with tins because of mining, and you're right as well that there are problems with mining too. But it is at least easier to recycle, and at least it degrades back in. I don't want to say there's not a problem with mining, because mining operations can also be very damaging to nature. But I would say that the overall impact of a tin can is less than that of a plastic bottle. Although actually that's one of the things that Pepsi was trying to manipulate people with. They were saying that the tin cans have a greater carbon footprint, and that might be true. And you shouldn't be misled by this. Often like big companies will try to confuse people by saying, oh, so-and-so has a bigger carbon footprint. A tin can may well have more carbon footprint than a plastic bottle, but the overall impact on nature of the plastic is far, far bigger, because that plastic is going to stay around for much, much longer. Whereas the tin can, they're talking about what's called virgin production, which means making it from scratch. And if they recycle it, then they can massively reduce that burden on nature. So don't be affected by that kind of manipulation that's out there. And Toby, great point. I don't get why we keep looking for alternative planets to live on. We are literally here because it's such a beautiful planet, and this is the one that works. Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. Anyway, right, I am probably going to have to go because I have to do all the other school stuff. But thanks for coming to this lesson. And it's funny that organisation is designed by our imagination, which in turn controls us. It's alive. Yeah, great point, Sigto. Anyway, I will... Death Priest saying the answer to your stream title is no. Yes, agreed. Do come back for the next live one. Ooh. Nearly spilt water all over the computer. That would be a disaster. Do come back for the next live one. Thanks all for coming, and I will see you all tomorrow. Ciao. Bye.